I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd get sick like this. It started small, just a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. I brushed it off at first, figured it was just a cold, something I could shake off with some rest. But weeks went by and it didn't get any better. In fact, it got worse. I'd be up all night, coughing until my chest hurt, barely able to catch my breath. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I'll never forget the day I finally decided to see a doctor. Maria, my wife, had been nagging me for days to go. "You're not getting better," she'd say, worry etched on her face. "Please, just go get checked out." She was right, of course, but I was stubborn, didn't want to admit that I might need help. But eventually, I caved. The doctor's office was cold, sterile, and smelled like disinfectant. I remember sitting in that uncomfortable chair, waiting for the results, trying not to let my mind wander to the worst-case scenarios. Maria was with me, holding my hand, trying to reassure me, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She was trying to be strong for me, but I could tell she was just as scared as I was. When the doctor came back with the results, my heart sank. He didn't have to say much for me to know it was bad. He used a lot of medical terms that went over my head, but the gist of it was clear. I was sick. Really sick. Something about my lungs not working right, something about treatments and specialists and more tests. It was a blur, really. All I could think about was how this would change everything. From that day on, my life became a series of hospital visits, tests, and treatments. I was in and out of the hospital more times than I could count, hooked up to machines, getting poked and prodded by doctors and nurses. It was exhausting, both physically and mentally. But through it all, Maria was there. She was my rock, always by my side, holding my hand, telling me everything was going to be okay. I believed her because I needed to. I needed to believe that I could get through this, that we could get through this together. But as the weeks turned into months, I started to notice a change in Maria. She was still there for me, but something was different. She seemed distant, distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. I tried to chalk it up to the stress of everything, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't want to believe it, didn't want to even consider the possibility that Maria, the woman I loved, the woman who had been by my side through all of this, could be hiding something from me. I remember one night, after another long day at the hospital, we were lying in bed together. I reached out to hold her, to feel her warmth next to me, but she pulled away. "I'm just tired," she said, turning away from me. It hurt, but I didn't push it. I was tired too, and I figured she just needed some space. But that night, lying there alone in the dark, I couldn't help but feel like something was slipping away from me. As time went on, the distance between us grew. She started going out more, saying she needed to clear her head, to take a break from everything. I didn't blame her. This whole thing was hard on both of us, but the more she pulled away, the more I felt like I was losing her. I wanted to talk to her about it, to tell her how I was feeling, but every time I tried, she'd brush it off, say it was nothing, that I was just imagining things. And maybe I was. Maybe it was just the stress, the fear of what was happening to me, making me paranoid. But that nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. It all came to a head one day when I came home from another hospital visit. Maria wasn't there. I called her, but she didn't pick up. I figured she was out, maybe running errands or taking a walk to clear her head. But as the hours passed and she still didn't come home, I started to worry. I tried calling her again, but still no answer. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there, waiting, hoping she'd walk through the door and everything would be okay. When she finally did come home, she looked different. There was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place, but it made my stomach turn. She didn't say much, just mumbled something about being tired and headed straight to bed. I followed her, hoping we could talk, but she just rolled over and pretended to be asleep. I lay there next to her, staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The next day, I decided I needed to know what was going on. I couldn't take the not knowing anymore. So when Maria left the house, I followed her. I felt guilty, like I was betraying her trust, but I had to know. I had to know if my worst fears were true. I followed her to a small cafe on the other side of town. I stayed in the car, watching as she went inside. A few minutes later, a man walked in. I recognized him immediately. It was James, my best friend. My stomach dropped. I watched as they sat down together, talking, laughing like nothing was wrong. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was the man who had been my friend for years, the man who had stood by my side through everything, and now he was sitting there with my wife, acting like they didn't have a care in the world. I wanted to storm in there to confront them, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, frozen, watching as everything I thought I knew crumbled around me. When they finally left the cafe, I followed them again, this time to a hotel. That was the moment I knew. There was no denying it anymore. My wife, the woman I loved, the woman who had promised to be by my side through sickness and health, was cheating on me. And she was doing it with my best friend. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Instead, I drove around for hours, trying to make sense of everything, trying to figure out what to do next. My mind was racing, filled with anger, hurt, and betrayal. I couldn't believe that Maria, the woman I had loved and trusted for so long, could do something like this to me. And James, my best friend, the person I thought I could count on no matter what, how could he betray me like this? It felt like a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. Part of me wanted to confront them right then and there, to demand answers, to scream and yell until they understood just how much they had hurt me. But another part of me just wanted to disappear, to pretend none of this was happening. I wasn't ready to face the reality of what this meant for my life, for my marriage. I ended up parking at a deserted spot by the river, just sitting in my car, staring out at the water. The air was cool, and the sound of the river rushing by was almost soothing. But inside, I was anything but calm. I kept replaying everything over and over in my head, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong, trying to understand how I had missed the signs. Had I been so wrapped up in my own illness that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me? Was there something I could have done differently? As the sun started to rise, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to go home, had to face Maria and figure out what the hell was going on. But when I walked through the door, I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The words caught in my throat, and all I could do was look at her, trying to see her the way I used to. But everything had changed. She was no longer the woman I thought I knew, and I didn't know how to deal with that. Maria acted like everything was normal, going about her morning routine as if nothing had happened. She made coffee, asked me how I was feeling, kissed me on the cheek before heading out to work. And I just stood there, letting her go, not saying a word. Part of me wanted to believe that maybe I was wrong, that maybe there was some other explanation for what I had seen. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had seen it with my own eyes, and no amount of wishful thinking was going to change that. I spent the day in a daze, unable to focus on anything. I kept replaying the scene at the cafe, the way Maria had looked at James, the way they had laughed together. It was like a knife to the heart every time I thought about it. I tried to distract myself to get my mind off it, but nothing worked. It was like this dark cloud hanging over me, suffocating me. When Maria came home that evening, I knew I couldn't keep it inside any longer. I had to say something, had to confront her. But even as I opened my mouth to speak, I felt the words slipping away like sand through my fingers. How do you even start a conversation like this? How do you look someone in the eye and ask them if they're cheating on you? Maria, I finally said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. We need to talk. She looked up at me, a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, crossing her face. What is it? She asked, her voice calm, almost too calm. I know, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I know about you and James. For a moment, there was silence. It was like the world had stopped, and all I could hear was the sound of my own heart pounding in my chest. Maria's eyes widened, and she looked like she was about to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me, her face pale. How long? I asked, my voice trembling. How long has this been going on? Maria swallowed hard, her eyes darting away from mine. It's not what you think, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, I could tell she didn't believe them herself. Then what is it? I demanded, my anger starting to rise. What am I supposed to think, Maria? I saw you. I followed you to the cafe, to the hotel. I saw you with him. So tell me, what am I supposed to think? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she took a step toward me. but I backed away, not wanting her to come any closer. Please, just listen to me, she pleaded. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just happened. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. It just happened. How many times had I heard that phrase before, in movies, in stories? But now, hearing it from Maria, it felt like the ultimate betrayal, as if cheating on me was something that could just happen, like tripping over a crack in the sidewalk. How long? I asked again, my voice cold. She hesitated, then finally answered, a few months. A few months. So this wasn't just some one-time mistake. This had been going on behind my back for months. While I was fighting to stay alive, while I was struggling with my health, she had been betraying me in the worst way possible. I felt a rage boiling inside me, a rage I had never felt before. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make her feel the pain that I was feeling. But instead, I just stood there, numb. Why asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why, Maria? Wasn't I enough? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It's not about you. It's not your fault. I was scared, okay? I was scared of losing you, scared of what would happen to us. And James, he was there. He was there when I needed someone. Someone? I repeated, my voice laced with bitterness. So you turned to him instead of me? I was the one who needed you, Maria. I needed you, and you weren't there. She tried to reach out to me again, but I pulled away. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this to happen. But it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. Whatever excuses she had, whatever reasons she gave, it didn't change the fact that she had broken my trust, that she had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for that. I need some time, I said, my voice hollow. I need to think. Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her standing there in tears. I didn't know where I was going, didn't have a plan. I just needed to get out, to clear my head, to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. As I drove away, the weight of everything that had happened crashed down on me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt completely and utterly lost. I spent the next few days bouncing from one cheap motel to another, not wanting to go home, not wanting to face Maria or anyone else. I felt like my whole world had been turned upside down, like everything I thought I knew had been ripped away from me. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that this had been going on for months while I was sick, it was all too much to handle. I tried to distract myself, to drown out the thoughts with TV, with mindless scrolling on my phone, but nothing worked. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, Maria and James, laughing, talking, doing who knows what behind my back. It ate away at me, consuming every thought, every moment. I kept wondering how I could have missed the signs, how I could have been so blind. But the truth was, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe that something like this could happen to me, like that the people I loved and trusted the most could betray me like this. I had been so focused on my illness, on getting better, that I didn't notice my life falling apart right in front of me. I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. Eventually, I'd have to go back, have to face Maria and figure out what to do next. But I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready to make decisions about my marriage, about my future. I wasn't ready to deal with the reality of what my life had become. On the third day, I decided to reach out to someone. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, who could help me make sense of all this. My first instinct was to call my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want them to know what was going on, didn't want to burden them with my problems. So instead, I called Greg, a friend from work. Greg was the kind of guy who always seemed to have it together. He was steady, reliable, the kind of friend you could count on when things got tough. We'd known each other for years, and even though we didn't hang out as much as we used to, I knew I could trust him. I didn't tell him everything over the phone, just that I needed to talk, and he agreed to meet up with me at a nearby bar. When I walked into the bar that night, Greg was already there, sitting at a booth in the back. He waved me over, and I slid into the seat across from him, feeling a mix of relief and dread. I didn't know how to start, didn't know how to tell him what was going on without falling apart. "What's going on, man?" Greg asked, his voice full of concern. "You don't look too good." I let out a bitter laugh. That's an understatement. Greg waited patiently, giving me the space to talk when I was ready. After a long pause, I finally just said it. Maria's cheating on me. The words felt heavy, like they were dragging me down. Greg's eyes widened in shock, and he leaned forward, his expression serious. What? Are you sure? I'm sure, I said, my voice hollow. I saw them together. She's been seeing James, my best friend. Greg's jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked like he didn't know what to say. I'm so sorry, man. I had no idea. Neither did I muttered, staring down at the table. I was so focused on getting better, on the hospital visits, that I didn't even see it happening. Greg shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. That's low, man. That's really low. And with James, that's just, I don't even know what to say. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. I don't know what to do, Greg. I don't know how to deal with this. I feel like my whole life is falling apart. Greg was silent for a moment, thinking. Have you talked to her? Really talked to her about it? I confronted her, I said, my voice thick with emotion. She admitted it, said it had been going on for months, and then she started crying, saying she didn't mean for it to happen, that she was scared of losing me. But what am I supposed to do with that? How do I move on from something like this? Greg sighed, leaning back in his seat. Man, that's a tough one. I don't think there's any easy answer. You've got to figure out what you want, what's best for you. Do you think you can forgive her? Do you even want to? I don't know, I admitted, my voice cracking. Part of me wants to just forget it ever happened, to try and make things work. But another part of me, I don't know if I can ever trust her again. And James, I don't even know if I can look at him. Greg nodded, understanding. Trust is a big thing, man. Once it's broken, it's hard to get back. But you don't have to decide anything right now. Take some time. Think about what you really want. You don't have to rush into anything. I just don't know what to do, I said, feeling lost. I can't stay in that house with her, but I don't know if I'm ready to leave either. Greg reached out and put a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to do this alone, okay? You've got friends who care about you, who want to help. Whatever you decide, we'll be here for you. His words meant a lot more than I could express at that moment. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark that maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know if my marriage could survive this, but I knew I wasn't alone. We talked for a while longer, mostly about other things, work, sports, anything to take my mind off the mess my life had become. But as the night went on, I realized that I couldn't keep running from it. I had to face it, had to figure out what I wanted and what I was going to do next. When I finally got back to the motel that night, I lay on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, thinking about everything Greg had said. I still didn't have any answers, but I knew I couldn't keep hiding. I had to go back, had to talk to Maria, and decide once and for all what was going to happen. The next morning, I checked out of the motel and drove back to the house. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart was pounding in my chest, a mix of fear and anger swirling inside me. I didn't know what I was going to say, didn't know how the conversation would go, but I knew it had to happen. When I walked through the door, Maria was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up at me, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence was heavy, suffocating, as we both tried to figure out how to start. I'm sorry, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry. I stood there, staring at her, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. Sorry isn't enough, Maria. What you did, it broke me. It broke us. She started to cry again, tears streaming down her face. I know it did, and I hate myself for it. But please, just let me explain. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to listen to her excuses, her justifications for what she had done. But I knew I had to. If there was any chance of moving forward, of figuring out what to do next, I had to hear her out. Fine, I said, sitting down across from her. Talk. Maria took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But everything just got so overwhelming. You were so sick, and I was so scared. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to cope, and then James, he was there. He was there when I needed someone, and I made a mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake. I listened, my anger simmering beneath the surface. So what? You couldn't handle it, so you ran to him? You didn't think I needed you? I was the one who was sick, Maria. I was the one who needed someone, and you weren't there. I know, she sobbed. I know, and I hate myself for it. But it wasn't just about that. It was everything. I felt like I was losing you, like I was losing us, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to be there for you the way you needed me to be. I shook my head, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. So instead of trying to fix it, you turned to him. You betrayed me, Maria. You broke my trust, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that. She looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation. Please, just give me a chance. Give us a chance. I know I messed up, but I love you. I love you more than anything, and I don't want to lose you. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to think that maybe we could work through this, that maybe we could find a way to move forward. But another part of me, a bigger part, knew that things would never be the same. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. I need time, I finally said, my voice flat. I need time to figure out what I want, what I'm going to do. I can't make any decisions right now. Maria nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I understand. Take all the time you need. Just please don't shut me out. Please don't give up on us. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. Instead, I got up and walked out of the house, leaving her sitting there at the kitchen table, alone with her guilt and her tears. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I couldn't escape the constant loop of thoughts running through my head, replaying every moment, every detail. The betrayal had dug deep into my soul, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a way to make peace with it. Every time I thought about Maria, about what she had done, a fresh wave of pain and anger washed over me. I stayed with Greg for a while. He offered me a place to crash, and I accepted, grateful for the support. He didn't push me to talk about it, didn't try to offer advice or tell me what to do. He just let me be, gave me space to process everything at my own pace. I spent most of my time in silence, lost in my thoughts, trying to figure out what my next step would be. Maria called me a few times, left messages asking me to come home to talk to her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't face her, couldn't deal with the emotions that seeing her would bring up. I wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, I focused on trying to regain some semblance of normalcy in my life. I went back to work, hoping that diving into my job would help take my mind off things. But even there, I couldn't escape it. Every task, every interaction felt meaningless, hollow. The betrayal was always there, lurking in the back of my mind, poisoning everything. One evening, after a particularly rough day, I found myself sitting in Greg's living room, staring blankly at the TV. Greg was out, so I had the place to myself. The silence was suffocating, and for the first time in days, I felt the overwhelming urge to do something. Anything. To break the cycle of pain I was trapped in. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over Maria's name. I didn't know why I was doing it, didn't know what I was going to say if she answered. But before I could overthink it, I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Adam? Her voice was soft, hesitant, as if she wasn't sure if it was really me. Yeah, I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. It's me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear her breathing as if she was trying to find the right words. I'm so glad you called, she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. I've been so worried about you. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hang up, to avoid this conversation altogether, but another part of me knew that I couldn't keep running forever. I listened to her, trying to process what she was saying, trying to make sense of it, but it didn't make it any easier. It didn't take away the pain, the anger. So what now? I asked, my voice cold. You regret it? You hate yourself for it. But what does that change? How does that fix what you've done? I don't know, she admitted, her voice small. I don't know how to fix this, how to make it right, but I want to try. I want to make things better, to earn your trust back. If you'll let me. I looked at her, seeing the desperation in her eyes, the genuine remorse. But it wasn't enough. I knew that. No amount of apologies, no amount of regret could undo what had been done. The trust was gone, shattered, and I didn't know if it could ever be rebuilt. I need more time, I said, my voice flat. I'm not ready to make any decisions yet. She nodded, looking down at her hands. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting, hoping that you'll give us another chance. I didn't say anything as I stood up to leave. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to express the turmoil I was feeling inside. As I walked out the door, I felt a sense of finality, as if this conversation had only confirmed what I already knew, deep down. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to clear my head, trying to figure out what I wanted. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the feeling that my marriage was over, that there was no going back from this. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a small diner. It was late, and the place was mostly empty. But I went in anyway, needing something to distract me from the thoughts swirling in my head. I sat at the counter, ordered a cup of coffee, and stared blankly at the menu, not really seeing it. As I sat there, sipping my coffee, I thought about everything that had happened, everything that had been said. I thought about the life Maria and I had built together, about the love we had shared, and how it had all come crashing down. I thought about the future, about what it would look like without her, and I realized that, as much as it hurt, I needed to move on. I couldn't stay in this limbo, couldn't keep torturing myself with what-ifs and maybes. I needed to make a decision for my own sanity, for my own peace of mind. And as much as it pained me, I knew what I had to do. The next day, I called Maria and asked her to meet me at the house. I could hear the hope in her voice when she agreed, but I knew that this conversation wasn't going to go the way she wanted it to. I knew that this was the end. When she arrived, we sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where we had had so many happy moments, so many shared meals and conversations, but now it felt cold, empty, like the love that had once filled this house was gone, replaced by a deep, aching void. I've made a decision, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. Maria looked at me, her eyes searching mine, trying to read my expression. What is it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't do this anymore, I said, the words heavy on my tongue. I can't keep pretending that things can go back to the way they were. Too much has happened. Too much has been broken. I'm leaving. The color drained from Maria's face, and for a moment she looked like she was going to collapse. Adam, please, she begged, her voice trembling. Please don't do this. We can work through this. We can make it better. Just give us a chance. I've thought about it, I said, my voice firm. I've thought about it a lot, and I've realized that I can't forgive this. I can't forget what you've done, can't pretend that everything is okay. It's not, and it never will be. Tears streamed down her face, and she reached out to me, but I pulled away, standing up from the table. I'm sorry, Maria, I said, my voice softening slightly. But I need to do this for myself. I need to move on, to find a way to heal. And I can't do that here with you. She didn't say anything, just sat there, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but I knew it would be a lie. So I turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the life we had built together, leaving behind the pain, the betrayal, and the memories. As I drove away, I felt a sense of relief, a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't easy, and I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. I felt like I was finally taking control of my life, finally making decisions for myself, for my own happiness. And as I looked out at the road stretching before me, I knew that no matter what happened, I would be okay. I would find a way to heal, to move on, to build a new life for myself, and maybe, just maybe, I would find happiness again.